All right, there are a couple other things that I want to spend a little time talking about. And first of all, is also the more than controversial topic of sexual orientation. And I have also seen this concept change as well. Because for a long time, when we're talking about identity, uh, when I talked about my sexual identity, it was rooted actually in my gender. So if I was male, then I had a male sexual identity. If I was female, or oh, obviously I'm not, but if a woman's identity, sexual identity, was rooted in her gender as a woman, what has happened today as a result of some of the changes of our language even is we've moved from sexual identity to and that sexual identity being rooted in biological gender to gender identity that is now a matter of choosing, or even biology, which you will also read in your book, is that gender identity can be either female or male. And so suddenly we move from sexual identity being grounded in who I am as a male or a female. Now gender identity becomes something that is sensed along the way, if you will. So essentially, when we talk about sexual orientation, we're talking about an enduring sexual attraction, uh, enduring sexual attraction toward members of either, toward members of either my own sex, my own gender, or the opposite gender or sex. And see, I don't want you to miss opposite. Oops, sorry. I don't want you to miss the fact that we're not talking about sex anymore as determined by anatomical sexuality. We're talking about gender now. And don't miss the changes in our language in terms of framing the world around us. And so the actual populations that we're talking about in Europe, we're talking about in both Europe and the United States, about 3% of men and 1 to 2% of women identify themselves as homosexual. And again, if you were to listen to our media, these numbers would not match the way that this group of people are actually talked about today. And again, I don't want you to hear animosity. I have no animosity whatsoever. I have talked to people who have struggled with their sexuality for a long, long time, and have a great deal of empathy and compassion for the difficulties they have. But the one thing that occurs in this discussion is that it is not about choice. It has been driven into the nature of biology. And from a Christian worldview, there is no evidence at all that God created us homosexual. He created us men and women, man and woman, and to be complementary and to express together the fullness of the Trinity itself. The other thing to keep in mind in this whole discussion is that for whatever reason, women women's sexuality seems to be, and this has generally been the case over time, tends to be more fluid. In other words, their object of sexual or their object of attraction can be tends to be more bisexual in the general culture than men. Men's sexuality tends to be far more rooted in either heterosexuality or homosexuality, and once they're in that tends to be be more focused. Once it's identified, there's not much going back in men, whereas women, there's less that case. We refer to this as erotic plasticity, is the term that is now used to describe this aspect of things. And that's even with, you see women who have either experimented or really gone into the lesbian bisexual lifestyle, they can come back out, it seems, far easier oftentimes than men can. The one thing that I would dispute is that in your book it says that there is no evidence that environmental influences determine sexual orientation. And when they make that assertion, I think we have to be thinking critically about such things. Is that we need to ask what evidence are we looking at here? Because, and that's one thing that I would agree on the discussion in your book, is that essentially research on sexual motivation is not value-free. And if the researchers do not identify for you where they're coming from and what their bias is, then this whole assertion of no evidence falls apart, because they have a bias. And if they don't identify it for you, then there's real question about that there is evidence, but they're interpreting it differently. And I think, generally speaking, at least in my experience of almost 30 years of working with people that struggle with their sexual orientation, is that what I have found is that that's not the case. Is that far and away, a lot of people that are either experimenting or have moved toward the gay and lesbian lifestyle have significant sexual abuse issues. And when they say they don't, then they probably are minimizing what exactly is going on there.